Hey everyone! So in this video, we're just going to cover a quick example of how to run live or real-time DBT alerting in Orchestra using a little Python task that I've put together. Now, a lot of you will probably be thinking, surely DBT alerts in real time anyway, because when you run a DBT command, you get the logs coming out in real time as each model finishes. But as much as dbt does let you know what's happening in real time, there's not a lot of mechanisms for actually doing things with that information. So most things will wait for on-run end dbt hooks, which obviously wait for the whole project to finish before kicking off alerting. And post hooks don't support triggers on failed models. And I'm sure there's a very long GitHub issue somewhere that you can go and read that explains why and how it's a design choice, but right now it's just kind of in the way. So I'm just going to walk you through how this goes together. Very roughly, how is this going to work? Well, we're going to have Orchestra run our DBT task as normal. That's going to spit out a whole bunch of logs in real time, telling us when and where tests are failing. We're also going to run a Python task parallel to our DBT task that's just going to consume those logs also in real time and pull them from the Orchestra API using the CLI. And then when it sees a failure based on some conditions we write and determine, it's going to construct a message and then use an incoming webhook to ping that over to Slack. Nothing very difficult. First of all, you can see I have a very simple DBT pipeline in Orchestra, and this one happens to be running on Databricks, but it's just a very simple Orchestra task, nothing fancy about it. But in my command, I have this log level debug and log format JSON flag set. Now, this isn't strictly necessary, I guess, but for the information I wanted for this, I've enabled DBT to spit out as much as possible in as nice a way as possible for me to consume from the logs, rather than me have to go and figure out how to get it from somewhere else. Now, alongside my DBT job, you can see I have this live alerts Python task running in parallel. And this is where the kind of magic happens here. So all I'm doing is running a Python file, which I can show you a little bit of in a bit, or walk you through. And I'm just going to run that and pass it the task run ID of the DBT task that is spinning up alongside it each time, because obviously that's going to change every time the pipeline runs. Down here, I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just installing the Orchestra CLI because that's what I'm going to use to poll our API. I could have written the Python to do it, but it seemed kind of pointless when it had already been done somewhere. And when it comes to authenticating for Slack in this use case, I've actually just stored a Slack incoming webhook in the Python connection here. So I'm just going to use that to send Slack messages rather than rely on lots of fancy alerting stuff. In terms of how I'm configuring these alerts and getting extra data into them on my DBT project, well, it looks pretty much like it does in most other alerting for DBT. It's all stored in that magic meta field that we can cram as much functionality as we can think of into. Now, in this case, I've configured 3 tests with these alerts on to kind of show that they happen in real time, which means I've set the upstream ones to warn so that we keep kicking through the DAG. But you can also see I've set various different tags and owners and channels on these to also show that we can distribute these to different places. And that really is all there was to set up in DBT, apart from the log level bit. So what does our magic Python script actually do? Well, it's fairly long, but most of that is just error handling and bits I could have done in other ways, really. But what it does is looks for the task run that we have, checks for DBT, checks that that's running, and then it uses the Orchestra CLI to start waiting for their logs to start coming out of DBT. So initially, Orchestra is going to have started the task and it's going to be running, but DBT is not going to have emitted anything yet. So we're just going to have to wait for that. So we check for that. And then finally, when it does start kicking out messages, we're just going through line by line, polling the API, polling the logs and looking for the right pattern to mark a failure, which in dbt is quite nice because they just give you a big fat fail in capital letters. Excellent. Once we find that, we take some metadata from that JSON, populate a nice Slack message, and then just ping it off into the abyss. Joking, it's not the abyss. It's a very eager to see stakeholder at the other end. So let's kick this off, and I'm going to go away and wait for it to finish because it takes a little while to run, and we'll come back and have a look at our alerts. So what's the real use case for this? Well, it's great that dbt alerts you when the job's done and things have failed, but as dbt gets smarter, jobs don't have to be split up as much, and also just because of company maturity, your DAG gets bigger and bigger. It's not always effective to wait for that to finish before you start alerting, and it feels like eventually we're going to end up in a state where the DAG is almost constantly running, so it really should just alert as soon as the test fails. And you can ping those off to all the different Slack channels or destinations for each different stakeholder in real time. And they're never going to be stuck waiting for a huge batch of them at the end of a single dbt run, which gets quite overwhelming when it goes through Slack. And there we go. As you can see, our DAG has finished, and we have this seed called orders raw. We have orders, and we have orders with products, all that have a alert configured on them. We can see that orders has failed one of its tests, as has orders with product. If we click into the seed, we can see that's kicked off a warning from its test as well. So let's jump over to Slack and see how these look. Cool. So here we have orders raw, we have orders, and we have orders with products. They've all been sent to the same channel in this case, but I've put the channel in here as a parameter just to prove that it could go where you need it to. And you can see we've also passed through a whole other bunch of metadata. We've got a fairly familiar looking result from dbt. But most importantly, if we look at the timestamps on this, we can see that this test failed at 21:35 and sent an alert seconds later. Similarly above, this one failed at 21:29 and sent an alert seconds later. It didn't have to wait a whole, 6 minutes to send an alert, which I am tired of waiting for my data alerts. 6 minutes is too much. So yeah, we can see that these alerts are coming through live to Slack, and we would be notified in real time if we ran this with our production project. And of course, there's no reason this could only be used to send alerts. You could do whatever you can write in Python. I will post this script and a brief README on how to configure this in the Orchestra Blueprints repo. So go take a look, give it a go, tell me what you think, and yeah, give feedback on what else it could do or how it could be improved. Be cool to see what everybody else builds based on what their projects need. Cheers.